What we put on the table, and I want to underscore the phrase "on the table." We believe this is a conversation that needs to take place. We have to move fast and hard, but we need lots of people understanding and engaging in it. And we're prepared to say, God, there's room for you to change it. But I'll tell you what we have started with. We said where you have workers either in the state or outside the state, and our goal here is to turn Wisconsin into a preferred destination for residential high-demand workers. Okay, that's a goal. Right? So for that population ready to go to work right away, what you need is a workforce investment fund, management fund. And the way that would work is, again, back to that employer, that employee sitting there at the table. The employer works out everything related to wages and conditions of employment. That's not part of this. But now that young worker has put together a package worth $20,000 over a 5-year period of time, and there's a contract. There are clawback provisions, the whole ball of wax, and that young employee signs and says, I'm good for it, okay? The employer says, I'm signing the same contract, which means I'm good for the 10 grand, I'm signing on. Package it up, you send it down to the State Department of Revenue, they verify the projections in terms of revenue being generated. Department of Revenue certifies it's the case, and somebody then says, okay, this looks like the state is now committed to paying this amount of money. That goes to the workforce, that package goes to the Workforce Investment Management Fund, and they look at it and evaluate it as a worthwhile investment or a not worthwhile investment. If they say it's a worthwhile investment, it starts right away, but no money gets paid until the first tax dollar is paid. So you're not creating jobs, you're filling jobs. It's a different exercise, and when nobody's gambling here, there's money, projections are there. So that's one place where we've started and said we think that's an important thing to at least think about, work our way through. The second piece is there's a second category of potential people who would come to Wisconsin, and that's people who are not quite ready to go to work, but they're ready to learn, they're ready to train, they're ready to certify. And we have, there's a massive amount of wonderful educational infrastructure. And there we need a bond structure. So we're looking at something for working titles called a worker pipeline bond. Okay? And this premise is that, again, that person would sign a contract with an educational institution or a training or certification institution. My own preference is that we would target the millions of millennial children in the 5 states surrounding Wisconsin for all sorts of reasons. But I think we can bring students into this state and use our infrastructure in a creative way. Ultimately, the same revenue stream pays back the bond. Okay, it's when they go to work they start generating that money. It's the same process, but you have to deal with getting the money and using it for a period of time before that. There is a third piece which we have not spent much time on, but I'll put it on the table. Part of what's important here is communities. Right? The strength of the communities, the ability to attract and retain, create opportunities for young people. We have a unique opportunity in the state of Wisconsin because we've got 16 to 17 markets like that with educational infrastructure, great stuff going on. But their tax bases are eroding. So the question is, how do you empower that out of this new revenue or revenue that found revenue? And there are models in Wisconsin and elsewhere of community economic development foundations. The Potosi Brewery is one of those. And so we want to look at that, and we're suggesting that regions take a look at the question of whether or not some of the indirect and induced monies that are generated as a result of finding jobs, if you could figure out demonstrably how to measure it, if you didn't take any more than 10 or 15% of it, and if you could figure out what you were going to spend it on, and you had responsible people, we think that's a model worth looking. I've taken way too much time, but what I want to say again is those are the 3 things that we put on the table. There are other things that people may want to look at, and we want people to look at these and add your suggestions and your ideas and your thoughts about how we might refine these. The one piece I will tell you is it is critical that these be sustainable. None of the 26 programs that Darren looked at around the country are, in my opinion, sustainable. Sustainable means to me that the program is paid for by the revenues it generates. Everything else was a budget line, which means you can't promise it'll be there. Everything else was a grant, which eventually runs out. Everything else, there are a couple of where they start, they've got money and they're using the interest off of it. But we really think it's critical that it be tied to the revenues generated from filling the job.